inspiring you to set the marketplace ablaze in partnership with an awesome and limitless God. This is the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast, and this isn't business as usual. Here's your host and Chief Fire Igniter, Shay Bynes.
Welcome back to the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. This is your host, Shay Bynes, and our goal here is to inspire you to operate your business completely yielded and in partnership with our awesome and limitless God. Today, my guest is Perry Marshall, and I must say that he is one of the most fascinating people that I have spoken to in quite some time. Perry is often referred to as an internet marketing legend, based on his contributions to the pay-per-click industry. And what's fun about his story is how a series of prophetic words from others and divine inspiration from his personal time with God have really been key to his business journey over the years. Over the last few months, I've received plenty of emails, text messages, and DMs from people who saw my story featured in Perry Marshall's latest book called Memos from the Head Office. It was a fun project to be a part of. And in our conversation today, you'll hear more about how Perry is creating space and opportunities for his clients to experience their own encounters with God. So listen in and enjoy this conversation with Perry Marshall. Perry Marshall, what's going on, sir?
Shay, it's a pleasure to meet you, and I've heard about you a lot, and you contribute a chapter to my book, but we never met.
Right.
So here we are.
That's right. So this is a pleasure. So I first heard of you. I heard your name for the very first time when I was reading God with You at Work by our friend Andy Mason years ago. And your name was right there as an endorser of the book. And then later, I think Andy shared a little bit more about you, and something that stood out. First of all, I've never done this, Perry. I'm going to tell you right now. I've never done this before. I've never read anybody's bio on this podcast ever, but I'm actually going to, I'm breaking tradition today after 300 plus interviews because I need to read your bio because it is one of my favorite bios ever. And I have to read it because people have to hear this. Okay. Are you okay if I read this bio?
Sure.
Here we go. This is what it says, you guys. Perry Marshall is one of the most expensive business strategists in the world. So if we could just stop there, that is fantastic. I've never heard that ever done, ever. I will keep going. He is endorsed in Forbes and Inc. magazine and has worked with clients such as FanDuel, Infusionsoft, and Loan Builder. He founded the 10 million Evolution 2.0 prize with judges from Harvard, Oxford, and MIT. Launched at the Royal Society in London, it's the world's largest science research award. He is a published scientist. NASA's Jet Propulsion Labs uses his 80-20 curve as a productivity tool. His reinvention of the Pareto principle is published in Harvard Business Review. His Google book laid the foundations for the 100 billion pay-per-click industry. An ultimate guide to Google Ads is the world's best-selling book on internet advertising. Another favorite part. Marketing maverick Dan Kennedy says, if you don't know who Perry Marshall is, unforgivable. Perry's an honest man in a field rife with charlatans. He's consulted in over 300 industries. He has a degree in electrical engineering and lives in Chicago. Perry, that is a fantastic bio.
So let me talk about that for just a second.
Please.
As a grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, pastor's kid. I wrote every word of that and meticulously crafted it myself. And it is ridiculously, obnoxiously immodest.
Fantastic.
Okay. And I was on a webinar with a guy named Adam Whitty who runs Forbes Books. And he was talking about how you craft a bio. And okay, now this is relevant to everybody. Okay, this is really important. When you market yourself, you have to communicate, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and people like me, or nobody's going to do business with you. Hello. Okay. And this false aw shucks modesty is going to get you nowhere, and you are not going to be influential. Okay. I would invite you, like, you know how there's like 80,000 different versions of the Bible. There's like the soccer mom Bible.
Yes.
And there's okay. There could be a audacious, immodest, ridiculous claims Bible.
Yeah, because there's a lot of those in the Bible.
Okay, and Jesus would be like numero uno.
That's right.
Now, if you want to be cool as a cucumber and modest, Daniel's a good one. Like one of my favorite scenes in the whole Bible is when the writing is on the wall and the king is literally crapping his pants in the middle of the palace, and they're like, go find somebody. And they're like, okay, if you can explain this, you get a third of the kingdom, and you get these robes, and you get wives. And he's like, keep your trinkets.
Right.
But I will tell you what this means. Okay. So, like, yes, there's a place for modesty, but the aw shucks Midwestern false modesty thing. Hey, who's kidding who? You're busting your ass to get A's in school. You're trying to be the best Pizza Hut delivery driver or whatever it is that you do. Okay.
Right.
Stop pretending that you're not trying to impress everybody, because everybody's trying to impress everybody. Okay. And we're kind of supposed to. Okay. And like all this stuff, like, okay, world's largest science prize. Okay. Why did I do that? Because I had to figure out a way to get taken seriously. Like, what scientist is going to hang on every word or seriously listen to a guy with an electrical engineering degree from the University of Nebraska? Okay, like I had to figure out some way to be influential, because I looked at the world and I said, they are jacking this thing up. They are doing this all wrong. I know that they're doing this wrong. I can't find anybody else who's doing it right. So I guess it's me. Okay. And I got to think that anybody listening to this podcast and I can identify something in the world where that's exactly what you are saying to yourself.
Yes.
Maybe it's just how they run the department in your company or whatever. But it's like somebody with a clue needs to show up. And I guess it's me.
Yes.
I only have half a clue, but if they have only 0.1 clue, my half of a clue is better than their 0.1 clue.
Well, I did want to talk about that, because that's the thing. There's so many things in your bio that beg questions. And that's one of my favorite things about reading your bio. It's like, I'm like, oh, this is incredible. Like the only thing I knew about Perry going in was around this 80-20 book. I knew this, your name and marketing. But when I read your bio, I was like, wait. There's a lot of really interesting things in here. And I bet there's a God story behind and in the midst of all of this stuff. And so I cannot wait to sit and talk to him about all of the things.
There's a God story behind almost all of it.
Yes. So I want to go back. We'll go forward. We'll just kind of see how this goes. All right. So first of all, you already mentioned you're a pastor's kid.
Yes.
So you grew up in the church. Yes. So faith is a part of just your whole background, even from the beginning.
Yes.
Now talk to me about the entree into entrepreneurship specifically.
So that started when I was 14 years old. I started building stereo equipment. And I started building stereo equipment because I didn't have enough money to buy what I really wanted. It's like, well, you can't afford the $200 speakers, but you could build yourself some speakers for $80 and they're just as good. Okay. And then I was hooked. Oh, I like this. Well, what if I did it this way? What if I did it that way? I got all these well, if I'm going to build something, I have to sell the last thing that I made.
Right.
Right. And so it turned into a business. It wasn't because I wanted a business. It was because I was a technician who needed a fix. Right. And so by the time I was in high school, I was selling speakers to my friends. And then I I got my brand sold by a local dealer for a while.
Wow.
And then I went to college, and then I was kind of done with that for a while. But then a couple years later, my friend recruited me in Amway. And the reason that I said yes to that, one of the reasons was I had gotten fired from 3 jobs in a row.
Oh, wow. As an electrical engineer?
As a college student, they weren't even engineering jobs. They were like stupid jobs, but I played a practical joke with my friend at work, and I got fired for that. And then I got fired for another thing. And all of a sudden I realized, like, this notion of a secure job is for the birds. Like, that is not real. And I don't know if I was starting to realize, like, Perry, you're not going to fit into somebody's thimble.
Right.
Right. And so then I also realized, like, well, I want, like, to do the things I want to do. I'm going to have to be some kind of a serial entrepreneur. I'm going to have some kind of income that doesn't just shackle all of my time every day, because I got to go do other interesting things. And so, now Amway, as far as I'm concerned, was pretty much a scam. But it was a scam that taught me a huge, like, it was a deep scam. It wasn't a shallow scam. It wasn't just some pyramid scheme. I mean, they had seminars and books, and I spent years, like, learning, your white shirt, red tie, blue suit, go have all these meetings, learn how to talk to all these people, learn how to maneuver these conversations. I mean, this is not something electrical engineers are inclined to do, but I really felt a fire under my butt, because I knew, I mean, I'm age 22. I knew it would be very, very easy for you to be 40 years old, chained to some job you hate because of the health insurance.
Right.
And the whole rest of your life is a bleak, meaningless nothingness, gray misery.
You had this foresight in your early 20s. You're like, I have to do something about this.
Yes. Okay. And so I just got ferociously obsessed with, well, somehow or another, I'm going to do this. And so I stumbled and I bumbled around. I get laid off from my engineering job. I wasn't fired, but I was laid off, and I go into sales, and then I struggle in sales. And eventually I discovered direct marketing, which really is the engineer's version of marketing, is what it really is. If you have friends who are serious internet marketers, and they analyze their clicks and their click-through rates and their conversion rates, and they track everything, like, and the direct mail people were doing that long before the internet.
Right.
Okay? That's like, an engineer can understand that.
Yes.
Right. And, like, there's a structure to a sales pitch. First you have to put the problem, and then you have to rub the salt into the wound. And, and I can understand this all as a process.
Right.
And then all this, finally sales started to make sense. Like, before that, it was like, I would just watch these people, and I would listen to Zig Ziglar tapes, and it would be, that all sounds great, but I can't make myself say that. And I don't, like, so it was quite a struggle, but I found my groove when I got into marketing.
So I heard that, so this book, in your bio, it said that you reinvented the Pareto principle. And it sounds like the foundation of what happened there is what really skyrocketed things for you in business. And I heard that the fact that even happened was a catalyst of that was a prophetic word that you received. Talk to me about that.
My entire career was launched from a 1-minute prophetic word in 2003. I mean, I'm literally telling you the truth. So I had read Richard Koch's book, The 80-20 Principle, which I think every entrepreneur should read his book. In fact, I think Richard Koch, Koch, is the most underrated business author today. His books are extraordinary. I read it. So I'm reading this book, and he makes a comment 80-20 has a lot to do with chaos theory. And then he just goes on. Well, that's something I had geeked out about. Like, well, chaos theory is a pattern and a pattern and a pattern and a pattern. It's like in a crack in your windshield, there's the crack and there's a crack coming off the crack and there's a crack off the crack off the crack. And it's like rivers.
Yes.
And that is how all chaos theory is, how hurricanes work. And I knew this, and I'm like, wait a minute, is he saying that there's an 80-20 and the 80-20 and the 80-20? Because I think that's what he's saying. Now, he never went on, he never explained it. And I'm like, I just like went into a rabbit hole.
Yes.
Because I connected a comment to this whole other world that I knew about. And so I was like, wait a minute, well, there's math for this. This is like a calculus formula. What is it? And I was stuck. And so it was a Friday, March 23, 2003, and I'm thinking about the calculus formula all day long, and I'm trying to figure, and I'm stuck. And like, I'm an engineer, so engineers do this. I know most people not going to relate, okay, but everybody's got their own little geek zone.
That's right.
If you're into knitting, then like you could just like go into this whole universe of knitting, right?
That's right.
So I'm in my little universe and I'm stuck. And the other thing I was thinking about that day was 3 days before I had my first genuine Caveman discovers fire moment as an entrepreneur.
Yes.
I had done a teleseminar. This is before webinars. This is before Zooms, like a phone line. I had sold $11,000 of stuff on a phone line in 1 hour, and this blew my circuits. I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, and how can I help the project in Mozambique? My brother-in-law had this little church school feeding program, AIDS hospice, all this stuff. And Mozambique was the 18th poorest country in the world.
Yeah. And
I was like, wow, like, how do I, help that out? And so I was thinking about these two things all day long. And there was a music thing at church. So I just went to the music thing. And I haven't talked to anybody about any of this all day long, but I'm in La La Land and they're playing Pink Floyd-y kind of music. And I'm thinking about calculus and I'm thinking about Mozambique. And I look up and a woman is making a beeline for me. I've never seen her before. She's African-American. She sticks out her hand. She goes, "Hi, my name is Vivian and the Lord gave me a word for you." And I thought, I've heard of this. I've never had it happen. They didn't allow anything like that at any of the churches I used to go to before that.
Right.
Like, don't ask, don't tell, or we'll throw you out. They like not allowed. And she goes, "The Lord told me that you're very good at math and you're working some kind of formula, some kind of equation, some kind of invention, and you're going to figure it out. Just keep working. You're going to figure it out." And I looked around and I did math. What are the chances that anybody in this room is working on a math problem? And what are the chances that some woman I've never seen before walks up to me and calls me out on that? And she turns to walk away and she spins around. She goes, "Oh, and he told me something else. You want to support missions and God is going to bless your business so you can support missions."
Come on.
I stared at her. I was almost in tears. And all I could manage to say was, "If only you knew." And she goes, "He knows."
And walked away.
And walked away. And I'm standing there. I'm like, did that just happen?
Had you even seen that happen around you before? Or you just heard stories about these prophetic moments that people had experienced before?
I had heard vague stories. I had read missionary books where these crazy things happen in the Amazon jungle. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I can remember my friend in elementary school had a dream that her white Volkswagen was pulling into an intersection and a cement truck came and smashed it in the bird's eye view. And then the next morning, she's at the same intersection and the light turns green and she remembers her dream and doesn't go. And a cement truck goes through. Like, this was as close as I would be able to think of at the time.
Yes.
Like, I know these kind of things can occasionally happen. I didn't have the slightest grid for, there's certain people, they can reliably do this.
Right.
I didn't get that. I didn't get a lot of it. But I'm like, this just happened to me. This, like, pinch myself. That just happened.
That's so good.
She just read me my mail. Well, 3 years later, I figured out the calculus formula. It took a while. I struggled. Finally did. It's like she told me, you keep working. Okay. And so I did. And that is now the backbone of my 80-20 book. It's published in Harvard Business Review. It's a calculus formula for fractal 80-20. It's actually very useful too. If you go read the 80-20 sales and marketing book that I read, like, it'll tell you, I sold these 100 videos for $100 each. Therefore, there's a client in this list that'll give me $7,000. It's like gravity. So it's extremely useful to any business owner. And the other thing that happened was my business started taking off. And the reason it took off was because Google introduced their advertising system, and I wrote a book about it. And then Google went supernova, and it took me supernova. And was
yours the first book on this topic that you know of?
It was probably the second or third. And when I say second or third, I'm talking early days before Google was the 800-pound gorilla of the internet. Like, people are messing around with this thing over here and they're writing ebooks. It was that kind of book. Okay. Wow. It wasn't published by a press until like 3 or 4 years later.
Yeah.
But 3 days before I met Vivian, I had this email exchange with a guy, and he goes, well, the guy I asked turned me down. I think you should speak about Google ads at my seminar. And I'm like, oh, well, I know what that means. That means I'm on the speaking circuit. In the marketing world, you don't get paid usually for like, you got to sell something, you got to have a product, you got to have a program. So I write a book and I put together a course, and then I'm selling the course.
Right.
And like this thing just, it was like I caught a touchdown pass. Wow. And I knew what to do when the football showed up. And
yes.
No,
go ahead.
Well, and so like this just like became a magic carpet ride, like both of these things.
That's amazing. I'm curious. I know that, we had talked about this prophetic word you received. Did you have the concept of engaging God in your business life at that time at all? You just hadn't experienced the prophetic, but were you seeking God yourself or engaging God as it relates to your business at that time of your life?
Yes, as best I knew how.
Right.
Like as good as a conventional evangelical person knows how to do that. Like,
right.
Okay, like I remember having this argument with my wife about how we do our giving, and I wanted to like do something that made sense, and she wanted to do something generous, and and like I finally decided to let her win the argument. It's like, okay, we'll do it your way. And then like an order comes in over the fax machine, and just seemed like those two things were connected.
Right.
Like I can't prove it, but like, look, if you've ever read any of the Bible stories, and if you know people of faith, like, that, look, if you invite God in, like I certainly absolutely knew, thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light to my path. And if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. Like I knew that.
Right.
So I didn't know the prophetic per se. Okay.
Yes.
But I knew that everybody, if they want to, can be guided by the Spirit. Right. And so I was, as best I knew how.
Yeah.
I was trying to do that.
Yes.
And a year before, my wife had started going to a vineyard church, which was like sex change operation for what I used to. Right? And then I was slowly wading into this and trying to decide, like, well, what do I think about this crazy stuff these people do?
Right. Yeah, I could imagine that. that was an experience for you.
Well, but what our observation was, like, look, we knew the debates about charismatics and all.
Right.
We knew that.
Yes.
Our question was, well, we're kind of undecided about this. The question is, are they doing it biblically as far as we can tell?
Right.
And the answer was yes. Like, this is not a tunnel of chaos. They aren't just like barking like dogs or whatever. Like, they're like, when somebody speaks in tongues, they do have an interpreter, and we're like, well, at least they're doing the stuff.
Right.
Okay. Well, let's see how that turns out, right?
Yes.
And so we just kind of felt our way through it, but it created this very interesting background because I grew up in a hyper exegetical, like, show you the Greek word, cross-reference all the 50 scriptures, like, yes. Bible is an internet Excel spreadsheet with hyperlinks going everywhere, like that kind of, I grew up in that, right? For analysis thing, right? And then now I'm in this hippy dippy, man. And like, well, I can roll both ways. Like, most people, they get into one of these and they just stay in it the rest of their life. Like, well, I've done super exegetical Bible scholar church. I've done Willow Creek, which is like seeker, engage with the culture. Like, that was completely different sex change operation, right? And then I've done this, vineyard kind of. So I've lived in three completely different streams of Christianity, and I know the rules, and like I know what the
cultural differences, right? All these pieces.
Okay, I also, like, in the last few years, I've gone to an awful lot of Black churches, and Vivian, the woman, I finally found her 10 years later, which is other story, and she's one of my dearest friends. I mean, she's like my sister from the west side of Chicago. She's from the ghetto.
Yes.
It's Black church. And like, some people have unquestionably know about all that. Some people have never seen it.
Yes.
Look, they all have something to bring.
And I love that you've experienced all these various different flavors and can appreciate,
and
that in the midst of all of it. So I love that.
Together, if people are up for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
That's so good. Okay. So I have to ask you, I won't spend too much time on here because there's so many other things I want to talk to you about, but I cannot ignore this thing that you'd mentioned a little bit ago around this science prize. And you had said that there was questions that need to be answered, and you're engaging in a community of scientists, which there's a ton of atheists and atheism in the midst of the science community, which you're very much a part of. And you're like, there's a question here. So talk to me about what you're doing with that and how there ended up being a $10 million prize and what's going on there.
So my brother stayed in hyper exegetical, went to seminary, got a master's degree, and he ended up going to China to be a missionary. And 4 years later, I went to visit him, and he's like, I don't believe this stuff anymore. I'm not a Christian anymore. Like, I'm done with this.
Right.
Super fast version. And this created an argument. And he had already been plying me with questions for several years, and they are hard questions. Like, this was the deep end of the pool. You have never had a theological debate until you've had it with a hyper exegetical Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, knows where all the bones are buried. And now he's engaging in the skepticism.
Right.
Like, I was up to my eyeballs, like the water level was almost over my nose and I was drowning.
PhD apologetics we're talking about here.
PhD apologetics. And I go, Brian, look at the hand at the end of your arm. This is a nice piece of engineering, and I'm an engineer. I should know. You don't think this is an accumulation of random accidents, do you? And he goes, hold on. And he just came right back with me with a kind of standard Darwinian, like dude, you don't need a designer. You just need millions of years, billiard balls, natural selection. You're going to get a hand. And I just stopped and I thought, I'm not sure I buy this, but I know a lot of scientists would say, yep, he's exactly right. I know that I don't actually know. I know that science is a very strange beast when you really get down into it. I'm going to stop arguing with my brother. This trip is turning into a misery slog. We're going to start having a vacation. I'm going to set aside this theological debate. And when I get home, I'm going to start with science.
Yeah.
Because that is what I like. Theology is squishy. Electrical engineering is not. Okay, so here we go. And so I go down this rabbit hole, and now I'm in biology.
Right.
And I was lost for a while. I'm like, okay, same laws of physics. It's like there's got to be a way to connect the dots between these two fields. And so I started to do that. And so fast forward a year or 2 years or so, I've bought tons of books.
Yes.
I have gone way down this rabbit hole. I'm reading scientific papers. I'm understanding the terminology. I'm understanding the history and everything else. And I came to the conclusion that the whole discussion about evolution, where did we come from? How does biology work? How does it evolve? How does it adapt? All of that has been, okay, here's a picture. Everybody has lived through what politics has, like the left is calcified on these certain things and the right is calcified on these other things.
Yes.
And they're just beating the crap out of each other while meanwhile completely ignoring most of the actual problems.
Right. These are the facts.
Okay. That's okay. We've all lived through that.
Yes.
This is exactly what the creationists and the atheists had done to evolution. Exactly the same. Both sides, both have butchered this topic beyond all recognition. And they have completely dominated. Now, as a marketer, I understand at a very deep level how two cult-like poles completely dominate a conversation, and all of the subtlety is just blasted out. So and true. All of the nuance and all of the and like there is no attempt to really understand, okay, this is all bumper stickers and slogans. And there was not anybody in the public's, like in the public dialogue,
right,
who was doing it right. What I did find was there are some scientists that nobody's heard of that have been doing this right for 100 years. But that is completely buried by this echo chamber.
Right.
Okay. Somebody's got to do something about this. And nobody in the public sphere is paying attention to the real questions. And I came to the conclusion that if you wanted to get down to one really profound question that you have to answer before you can really get anywhere is, where does code come from? How do you get a code? Now, we all know what code is. All of us, we are talking code is doing the Zoom call, right?
Yes.
Well, code always comes from living things. I have $10 million to verify. Nobody knows a way of getting code without a life form being there first.
And that's what the prize is about.
Yeah.
So literally someone has to show proof that it's not connected to a living in order to get the $10 million prize. That's what this prize is about.
Yeah. How do you get code without cheating? If you can pour chemicals in your bathtub and get code to go from one end to the other, whatever it is you did, we want to buy the patents. We'll write you a check for $10 million.
Right.
We will also partner you into the company. So then there's more. And we will go figure out how to commercialize this. It may literally be the secret of life itself, which is probably friggin' scary. Okay, but this is what the prize is. I'm like, nobody knows how to answer this question. People are making up stories. People are doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Other people are going, God did it, God did it. See, you stupid, God did it, God did it. See, you stupid, God did it. Well, neither one of, like, happy chemical accident, that's not helpful. Well, just God did it. Just God did it. God did it. God did it. Right. Okay, I believe in God. That's great.
Yes.
But you are not helping science in the slightest with your.
I love what you geek out over. I love the things that you're geeking out over. This is fun. I love it.
So yeah, it's very geeky, but it's like, look, this is like, where does code come from? Like, is there any question in the 21st century that is more relevant? And
so
like,
good.
Okay, all the AI guys, all the movies about HAL 9000 or the Terminator.
Yes.
All those movies are about this question.
Yes. Yes. We've been playing this out in the media for decades.
Yes. Okay, so this question is all over the place.
Yes.
Like, well, if you go to the bottom to the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the swamp, it actually just comes down to this one thing. And I grab a description out of an engineering book and I attached a $10 million prize to it. Well, so this got very interesting because I thought I knew this was important. I knew I had to do this. I got a prophetic word. You need a $10 million prize, not a $1 million prize.
Wow.
Okay. I thought that this was going to put me like on the world stage. It didn't. What I learned was nobody wants a guy on the world stage calling out the elephant in the room. The Christians don't want it. The atheists don't want it. The media doesn't want it. It was like, I'm whistling Dixie in the dark here. Is anybody going to pay attention to this? But what happened was I found that most scientists, even professional scientists, the average college professor, the average physics, biology professor, even they wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole because it's too controversial.
Right.
And when you're a professional scientist, you got to get grants, you got to publish papers, your reputation is very fragile. And so you can't, you got to stay in your lane. But the rock stars can't afford to ask questions.
Right.
And so I needed prize judges, and what I ended up getting was rock stars. I got the leading geneticist at Harvard Medical School whose student won the Nobel Prize last year.
Wow.
Okay. I got the leading physiologist at Oxford University. Okay. I got arguably, the leading atheist philosopher whose name is Michael Ruse. And I got, and they're all like, I love controversy. I love controversy.
Right.
Everything I do is controversial. This is controversial. I like this. I think this is a good question. And so I got invited to the Royal Society to announce the prize, doubling to $10 million. And like Isaac Newton was the president of the Royal Society in 1660 or something. So like I couldn't have fathomed
right,
like getting to these places, but it was, listen, when you have a burn for a particular thing, like you don't choose it, it chooses you.
Right.
And there's a moment somewhere where you get the head office taps you on the shoulder and like, so you going to do this?
Yeah.
And if you say yes, and then you just keep saying yes, you have no idea. Okay. And every person's like if you keep saying yes to a tap on the shoulder and then the yes to the next one and yes to the next one, I can only tell you this. It will take you somewhere no other human being has been.
Yeah.
And you will not be a cookie cutter, and you'll not be just another CPA or just another like franchise owner or just another this or that. Like you will be pulled into God knows what.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that I keep thinking about Ephesians 3:20. It's that exceeding abundantly above all you ever would have asked or even thought, it's the God adventure. I love that. Now you said a term, you said head office. So I think this is a good, this is a good place. There's this book that I have my story in a chapter in this book called Memos from the Head Office. And this many would think is kind of an unusual book, perhaps, to be published and written or co-authored here by Perry Marshall. So I know there's a God story behind this. Memos from the Head Office essentially has a number of stories in it of how people progressed in business by paying attention to the memo from the head office, something that they heard from God and went forward with that, and kind of breakthrough moments that people experience. Now, I think I also heard that before this book was ever, written, you'd been kind of doing this memos from the head office thing with a very diverse group of people in your community, not necessarily Christians, people of all different faith backgrounds. So talk to me about how you even started doing this, which some would say is kind of unusual if you don't have a Christian audience or whatever, and how you're like navigating it because there's so many different faith backgrounds, but yet still stand unapologetically in your own. So talk to me about this.
So the title comes from a dear, dear friend of mine who was not a Christian, not a religious guy, who was married to a Christian woman who one day she said, Tom, tell Perry, like the certain situation he's in, like not a good situation. Tell him, like, stop doing that. And so Tom calls me and he goes, Perry, Vicky gets memos from the head office. And she said, you need to. Now, I thought, well, first of all, I'm stealing that phrase because that is, I love.
Right.
And I don't know how it is. Like Tom knows that his wife is like this, and he still doesn't exactly seem to believe in a head office. So I don't know how to like figure that out.
Right.
Okay. But I loved the phrase because it's so much less presumptuous than saying, I got a word from the Lord for you.
Yes.
Which sounds very sanctimonious. And look, words like Lord and God and Jesus have so much friggin' baggage. Okay. In fact, like, I know lots of people listening to this, they're like, I love God, I love Jesus. Well, not everybody. And it's not because they're bad people.
Right.
It's because people did really jacked up stuff to them. Like, okay, let's take me, for example. My mom was bipolar with mild schizophrenia. And when my dad took her to a psychiatrist, they demoted my dad from his pastor job.
Wow.
And publicly shamed us in front of 2,000 people. Okay, now it would be very easy had history gone just a little different. Perry's like, I am out of here.
So true.
I don't want none of them hypocrites. And I don't want to hear about Jesus. I don't want to hear your crap.
Yeah.
Okay. And I could have hated God from that point. Well, let's just understand that would not be entirely unjustified, right? And there's a lot of people like that's their story.
Sure.
And I was more story than I have time for right now, but I have always found myself in the demilitarized zone. the strip of land between North and South Korea.
Yes.
Where they like have a conversation and nobody's shooting anybody.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
I knew we need a demilitarized zone where faith is on the table, but it's not in your face and is not all corrupted by baggage-laden language. It has to be in language that everybody can own, understand, and use and relate to. And so the way this started was Vivian, this strange woman, I completely lost track of her, had no idea who she was or where to find her, other than I knew this one guy who sort of knew who she was. When my 80-20 book came out, the dedication says, to the master mathematician and to Vivian. And when the book came out, I'm like, I have to find this woman and show her that she's in the dedication of a book. And so I hunted her down and I found her and we became friends. And I said, hey, I got this crazy idea. Let's have you and my friend Aaron, who's also prophetic. Let's do a go-to webinar, just audio, no video, just first names, prophetic words. Okay. So Vivian and Aaron get on go-to webinar and I'm sitting there and I go, Jason R, go. And then they give a word for Jason R. And then I go, Shay B, go. And then they give a word for Shay B. And then Jen F, go. And this is how it goes. So I told them the original Vivian story and said, here's what we're going to do. Send out email to my list, say, hey, Renaissance Club members, which is my monthly marketing membership. Anybody wants on, we could take 30 people on this call. So 30 people get on this call and Vivian and Aaron start giving them words from the head office.
Right.
And people are typing in the chat like, holy crap, man, like these people are reading my mail. Like, how do they do this? Like, that was so spot on. Whoa. I'm like, well, that worked. Like, people really liked it. They were encouraged.
Yes.
And if you actually know the prophetic, the real prophetic, you discover how rich and amazing and affirmative, like everybody sort of is afraid that God is pissed. Like Jesus is coming back and he's pissed. And I'm going to beat you over the head. Like, yeah, like when I was in university, like some guy would show up every few months with a cross and he would drag his cross around the campus and he would yell at everybody, you're all going to hell. And people like, I don't want that guy. Okay.
Right.
Well, look, God bless the guy for living his convictions, but man, like he is not representing God's heart for people when he does that.
Right.
And so we would get on these, so we made this a regular thing. And so every month we would have one of these things. Well, these started getting popular. And then we got to do 2 of them every month. And then we're up to 11 now, last I checked.
Wow.
And it's like, well, if you don't sign up, like when the email comes out, like if you don't sign up like right away, you're not getting in. And like we, as best we can, like we keep adding these things on. And like, so in Planet Perry, as we call it, there's this term, memo from the head office. And everybody understands that whether you want to call it God or the universe or Muhammad or Mary or the muse or the logos or inspiration or whatever, everybody understands that you can switch that on and you can listen for it. You can cultivate the ability to hear it, that there are other people that have cultivated that ability. And that if you have a respectful protocol of giving and receiving this kind of stuff, then you can have a safe space. And, I tell people, like, we have live memos meetings sometimes, and I'll say, this is not a come to Jesus meeting. Now, it could be a Jesus comes to you.
Right.
That totally
has the potential, right?
And everybody's like, okay, right? They're Jewish or they're Hindu or they're whatever. And so, like, and you got to appreciate the irony and the humor in all of this, because you got to remember, like, I'm the guy who grew up in the super exegetical church. Like, I'll give you an example. When I was 14, I was the sound man of a Christian band that there was a newspaper story about the Christian band, and they had a picture of the band, and there was a picture of Perry the sound man over in the corner. It was like this full page article, and it said, within a year, the band had become ecumenical. And ecumenical means inter churches and like cross faiths and stuff. And I call the band leader. I'm like, who said ecumenical? That's a bad word. Like, we had this whole conversation about, well, you can't be doing that. That's just the compromising people, because like where I grew up, their attitude was like, we got the stuff.
Right.
Everybody else doesn't. And this is the place. And we have it all figured out. It's all on an Excel spreadsheet. Okay. And like, I was completely wrapped up in all of that.
Right.
And now I'm the guy who understands, hey, listen, that thing Gandhi did? Yeah, that probably was a memo from the head office. And does that fit into your Jesus grid? Probably not. Does that mean God wasn't showing him stuff that he wanted? No.
Right.
Like, and my friend Tom, who coined the term memos from the head office, he had this great saying. And he had this deep radio voice. Harry, there's burning bushes everywhere.
The guy who doesn't believe in any of this stuff is talking about burning bushes, memos from head offices.
Look, he was too, he could not articulate a theology.
Right.
But he had an IQ of 180, literally. He was too smart to not think that a Moses story was important.
Right.
He gets that. Okay.
Yes.
Now he's not going to agree with some Christian who's going to show up with all of his framework. But yeah, he knows that Moses story is really important. And he thought, like, he told me, when I was 14, I went to this sermon and they talked about the Sermon on the Mount. And I thought it was the most humane thing I'd ever heard in my life. I had a friend tell me 2 weeks ago, the Sermon on the Mount is about the most Buddhist thing you could ever have in the whole world. Well, yeah, like, it's not your job to decide, whether God was happy with Gandhi or not. Not your job. I remember some Bible study where we were arguing about whether Gandhi is burning in hell. Who told you?
Why are we having this conversation? Right.
Why are you even talking about this?
Right.
Why aren't you, like, somebody saw a bumper stick. You know how Colorado Springs is like the Christian capital of the world? So one of my friends saw a bumper sticker in Colorado Springs that said, "Focus on your own damn family."
There's a really popular video from years ago that went around YouTube. The little girl who was probably about 3 years old, and she said, "Worry about yourself." I think that's appropriate for the moment.
Yeah,
no, I love that. Well, I am curious because now that this book's been out for about 6 months, maybe, or less.
Less.
Yeah, less. Yeah. I'm curious to know. I mean, you've been doing this, like you had described, with Planet Perry and your community. I'm curious to know, have you been surprised by any, responses you got from the book or, from people of various faiths? I do love, by the way, how you handled the appendix when you're sharing just from your own faith and sharing from your own perspective and sharing how you're empathetic and understanding of how people may not want to be okay with the Jesus thing. Like, I just thought you handled that so gracefully in your appendix, by the way. So that's side point. But like, what have you experienced from people reading this book?
Well, surprise numero uno is there's not a spate of 1-star reviews. I thought I thought if there's any book that's going to get 1-star reviews, it's going to be this one.
Yeah.
Right now, there's 0. Like, how
that is actually surprising.
It's got 4.8 or 4.9 stars on Amazon. Like, almost everybody that's read it has loved it. Now, I'll say this. We slaved over this book. I thought, well, this shouldn't be too hard. We just like interview a bunch of Memos people and we get their stories and we transcribe them. No, because we put it out to readers. Like, I would hire readers on Fiverr to read the book and give me honest feedback. And by the way, when you hire a reader, they'll be honest.
That's true.
When you ask your friends, they always sugarcoat it, right? And so it'd be like, well, yeah, but this chapter rubbed me the wrong way. And it would very often be from non-Christians who felt like I was being too preachy, or there was just, and so we just had to like dial this thing in. I also discovered something in my evolution book, which was, if you want to insert your personal views, which everybody may not agree with, if you put them in an appendix, it almost sort of gives you permission to say whatever you want to say, and they won't necessarily feel like, well, that was the book.
That's good.
And so you have multiple places where if you want to hear my personal viewpoints on these things, go to Appendix 1.
There's an invitation right there.
Right. But you get to decide if you want to engage with that or not. And so there's, what has always worked for me is this permission marketing thing. Okay,
yes.
So on my email list, you can get on the spiritual stuff, and there will be unsubscribe links. If you don't want the spiritual stuff, click on this unsubscribe link and we'll take you out of that conversation. Yes. We only want people who want to be in that conversation in that conversation.
Yes.
And see, this is like, it is not your job ever to go drag people that don't want to have a conversation into a conversation.
It's not even the character of God. Like, you look at how Jesus operated. I mean, it's like there's always this invitation from God. And this is exactly what you're doing, is you're creating these spaces of invitations, because you know your audience isn't Christian audience. It's like, it's the audience.
Yes. And Jesus spoke in parables. And guess what? Perry Marshall speaks in parables.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, my business book. You want to read a Google ads book or a Facebook ads book. There are parables of a sort. And it's not like, oh, I am engineering this parable.
Right.
I just happen to believe there's burning bushes everywhere.
Yes.
And if you want me to connect the dots between this thing and this faith thing, I can do it. But I don't have to do that for you to get the message.
Yes. Yes. That's good. This is all good. Perry, this has been a fun chat for me. I think that listeners have really enjoyed this. Okay, so you guys, first of all, I'm going to go order the 80-20, what is it called? 80-20 marketing and sales?
Marketing. 80-20
sales. Okay, I'm going to go order that as soon as we get off. For those who want to connect with you and the goodness of all the things that you're up to, what's the best place for them to go?
Go to perrymarshall.com/more memos and sign up, and you'll get notifications. That is how you get the bonus material for the book. I think, okay, just if I may be audacious, do your listeners know the term thin place?
I don't know. I don't know the term thin place.
That is my word for, it is a place where heaven and earth are closer together than normal.
Yes.
Okay. I remember walking into the cathedral, the Notre Dame Cathedral in Montreal, and the minute I walked in there, it was like, ooh.
The presence of God.
Oh, yeah. I think everybody, maybe they're standing on a cliff feeling insignificant, or maybe the birth of a baby, or maybe a worship space, but like, oh my goodness, there's something different here.
Yes.
Okay. That's what I call a thin place. This book is a thin place. If you walk through this book, something will open up to you.
Yes. So good. You guys go to perrymarshall.com/more memos.
Yes.
Yes. Very good. And so, Perry, this has been a delight. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Shay, what a pleasure. What a pleasure. Thank you.
Perry Marshall is an interesting character. And I really enjoyed the opportunity to talk to him. I have with me here Mr. Bynes, our CEO of Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur. What's going on, babe?
All is well.
Good, good. All right. So your takeaways from this episode with Mr. Perry Marshall.
So the first point I have is there are solutions that you can solve, but sometimes it takes you having influence. So Perry was talking about, not necessarily having a lot of influence in, the scientific world and wanting to be able to bring a solution to an issue. And so, he created a situation, or God gave him wisdom to create a situation that caused him to have more influence to be able to solve that problem, to have answers.
It kind of reminds me of that scripture that talks about how your gift will make room for you and bring you before great men. It's like the gift is the solution. And by bringing that gift forward, it's creating a space of influence to others that he desires to bring influence to. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the second point I have here is when you have like a burning passion for something, many times it's almost like God is choosing you to solve that issue, and if you just keep saying yes, you keep showing up and saying yes to that burning passion, a lot of times it'll take you places where you never thought you would end up.
Yeah, so true. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Mm-hmm. Okay, give me one more.
Okay, so the third one I have here is don't drag people into conversations they don't want to be in. He was talking about his community in his book, Memos from the Head Office, and how, he oftentimes get to talk about God, but he's not bringing people that may be of different faith backgrounds into a conversation that they're not willing to have.
Yeah, it's like creating the spaces for it, creating the invitations for it, and then allowing people to kind of opt into that, and then meeting them right where they are, which I think is a really healthy kingdom approach. That's good. That's good. All right, those are great takeaways, Phil. So you guys, listen, I am in the midst of finalizing the recordings for our upcoming course called Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Masterclass. And when that course comes out, which will be in just a few weeks now, Firestarter School will go away. So I am sharing this as a last, it won't go away for those who already have it. You have lifetime access to it. You're not going to lose access to the course, but we won't be selling it anymore. And so this is my friendly heads up for those of you who really haven't taken advantage of this yet. Our Firestarter School, which is available at the price of your own choice. It's a really great, Phil calls it, what do you call it? Boot camp? You call it
basic training.
Basic training. Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur basic training on just some practical steps of walking this thing out as a Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur, doing business in partnership with God, led and empowered by the Holy Spirit. So again, it is available at the price of your own choice. That also won't be available for much longer. So if you want to go ahead and get in before that course goes away, you should go over to kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com/Firestarter School. Mr. Bynes, anything before we close out today? Anything else?
No, nothing else.
All right, good deal. Well, we look forward to talking to you more next week on the next episode of the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. Take care and God bless.
Thanks for joining us on the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, we encourage you to subscribe and spread the word. And don't forget, you can gain access to even more resources, plus a thriving community of fire starters by visiting our website at kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com.